The UK police seem to have wrongly seized a collection of antique weapons. So Leamington Police, part of Warwickshire Police, earlier this week proudly boasted on their socials that they had seized 129 edged weapons from a property in Whitnash. The problem is that all of the items pictured are completely legal to own. So in this video we're going to look at how Leamington Police have potentially used the law incorrectly and hopefully maybe get this collector their antique collection back. You know, this is a really bad move which creates bad feelings between citizens, lawful abiding citizens like you and me, also museums, antique dealers and auction houses and the police. And it's caused outrage all over the internet. And here I offer my services pro bono, free of charge, to both the collector and Warwickshire Police. Hopefully I can help, and this video can help, correct some of the misunderstandings of current law. I'm happy to attend any subsequent court hearings and my contact details are down below. But hopefully it doesn't have to go that far and we can sort this out now. So let's get into this story. Hi folks, so firstly for people who don't know who I am, my name's Matt Easton, I'm a former head of arms and armour at a London auction house and I'm also an antique dealer. I work with various museums including the Royal Armouries, also TV and film companies. And I also advise the Home Office, NPCC and other organisations and also lawyers and the police on edged weapons and edged weapon law as we know it now. As well as writing reports for court cases, I also provide free pro bono advice to various police forces around the country. I am myself a former civil servant, 15 years service, security cleared, represented my country at various meetings and including Cobra meetings and things like this, and I have worked in conjunction with the police and the military. A few days ago, Leamington Police posted on their socials about the Op Sceptre programme, which they're doing at the moment to remove unnecessary weapons from the streets and potentially even from homes. Unfortunately, to illustrate that point, they put a big photo up and proudly proclaimed that they had seized 129 antique weapons from one house in Whitnash. And they went on to explain some of the law, how in 2021 there was an amendment to the 2019 Offensive Weapons Act, which I know quite well, whereby people couldn't own certain prohibited weapons in their house. And you know, I know this law really well. I was actually involved in giving some advice to the Home Office and other organisations when it was going through, and I even submitted a public statement on it as well. And here's the problem. Of those items in that photo that we can see, none of them are relevant under the Offensive Weapons Act. The photo shows thousands of pounds worth of antiques, all of which are exempt under the 2019 Offensive Weapons Act and the 2021 amendment. Let me reiterate that for clarity, okay, because everybody needs to understand this. Under the Offensive Weapons Act 2019, antiques over 100 years old are explicitly exempt from that act. And as I say, in this case, antique, and it's true in tax as well, means over 100 years old. In fact, for one of the items on the prohibited list, curved swords, over 50cm blades, there are further defences as well, which include if they are blunt, if they're used for sporting or reenactment purposes, if they're traditionally forged, or if they're made before 1954. So in fact, there's a whole bunch of defences, essentially like they're called defence exemptions, for curved swords in addition to those. Quite simply, without those defences in place, in the UK, we wouldn't be able to preserve historical artefacts, have fencing competitions, have reenactment events at castles, or make TV films and movies. So this is the most important part for everybody, including the police, to realise. The 2019 Offensive Weapons Act and the 2021 amendment to it only applies to the list of prohibited items. It's only those things. Antiques are exempt and curved swords have a whole bunch of other defences as well. So absolutely anybody can have an antique collection or heirlooms from their family in their house, or indeed a collection of fencing weapons, for example. In order for these activities to continue, which obviously they are legal, you can go to any auction house or antique dealer and buy these things and have them, they are legal to own. The Offensive Weapons Act does not apply to their antique weapons discussed here, or indeed things like kitchen knives or garden tools or anything else. It only applies to that list of prohibited offensive weapons. And as far as I can see, it doesn't apply to anything in this photo. So let's have a little quick look at this photo and I'll just name a few of the things to illustrate my point. So we can see that this person is clearly primarily a bayonet collector. There are a whole bunch of bayonets here, which are all of the ones I can see straight off are pre-World War I, so they're all antique, over 100 years old. There's a Martini Henry bayonet there. 1876 pattern. This is a French chasseau, 1866 pattern. Down here is a Sawback Pioneer's sword, 1856 pattern, probably late 19th century Boer War period. There's another one right there. We see a Burmese or perhaps Thai Da there, and there's another one over here. There is a World War I to World War II era kukri, again, nothing prohibited there. There is what looks like, it's a bit of a difficult angle, but probably a double-barreled, perhaps Swinburne or Jacobs bayonet, very desirable object there. Down here we have an Indian cavalry sword for the Baroda States, late 19th century. We've got up here a cut-hilt rapier. The list goes on, but you know, none of these things that I can see are in any way an item from the prohibited offensive weapons list that would mean that the seizure would have been valid. So as we can see, none of these things are illegal to buy or sell. Most of them are antiques, and those that aren't antique are also not applicable under the prohibited list of offensive weapons. And if these were illegal to buy and sell and own, I can tell you there'd be a lot of antique dealers and auction houses up and down the length and breadth of the country. They'd be in an awful lot of trouble right now. The fact is that these antique objects, like those behind me on the wall right now, are important historical artifacts. Everybody recognises this in the government and law enforcement and at the Home Office and everywhere else. Some of these were carried by named and known important historical figures in wars like the Crimean War, the Indian Mutiny, the Boer War, World War I. Some are owned still by the families that originally, of the people, their ancestors that originally carried them in those wars. Some of them are family heirlooms. And of course, stately homes are full of these things as well. I don't hope, anyway, that Warwickshire Police isn't going to be raiding any stately homes, or Warwick Castle, for example, or God, like Buckingham Palace next. I don't know. Where does it stop? The fact is that these are 100% legal to own in a private residence. Doesn't matter whether it's Warwick Castle, my house, or someone else's house over there in Leamington Spa. Now, just to caveat this, there are some legal reasons and some correct and understandable reasons why these could have been seized. And obviously, I don't know the full background to this seizure, and so I must caveat this to be fair to Warwickshire Police. The first obvious example is if they are stolen goods. If the person that had them in their house is handling stolen goods, completely understandable that they've been seized, but then they shouldn't have been seized under the Offensive Weapons Act. They should have been seized as stolen goods, and they should be giving them back to the person that they were stolen from. So I don't really think that probably that is the case in this particular incident. Now, there is another bit of law, of course, whereby if these weapons were being used in another criminal act, for example, if they were being used to intimidate or hurt someone, then they would have become offensive weapons in the eyes of the law, because whilst they weren't prohibited to begin with, because they were used as offensive weapons, they would therefore be seized. I think it's unlikely that 129 objects were all used as offensive weapons, but possibly they were taken as evidence because someone has been hurt with one. I don't know. So that is, you've got to caveat that. And also we have to say sometimes things can be seized because they might be associated with criminal activity. So if the person had, for example, been accused of domestic violence or had been dealing drugs out of their house, then indeed the police would be justified in seizing things which could be used to facilitate, enable other crimes. So that is a part of the law, absolutely. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a legal expert, disclaimer there, but I understand this part of the law, and those could have been seized for that reason. However, in the articles and the statements that have been put on the internet, it suggests that these were seized under the Offensive Weapons Act, and that is wrong. So look, I stand ready to help in any way that I can, either to the person that's had these things taken off him, in my view unlawfully, or indeed to Warwickshire Police, because I think that this needs to be corrected as quickly as possible. I stand ready to help. If you don't want to come to me, my contact details are down below. I can recommend to you any of the other members who are on the same committee, the other experts on the same committee as me, and I'm sure that they will give exactly the same advice as I would. And look, I offer this help completely openly and pro bono to Warwickshire Police and indeed to any other police force which is struggling with seizures of this type. And I do it regularly. I've done it for various police forces. They've seized things and they didn't really know whether it was legal or not, so they took it, they asked me, I say, yep, that's an antique, or that's exempt under some other defence, and then they give it back. And it's a clean and cut thing. It saves time. It means we don't need to waste money in the court system. So I'm completely happy to help. And I know that my colleagues at the Royal Armouries also do a very similar service. And this message goes to the police. You know, I know you have a difficult job to do. I know you have to deal with a huge number of really difficult things. And I do sympathise. I have worked with the police in my former careers, and I've got friends in the police now, and I've got friends also who are retired police. So I completely get it. I know this is difficult, and because I'm on the kind of front line of these laws and feeding into advice basically on the laws, including things which are going through at the moment, I do understand how difficult it is for the police to keep up to date with what the latest version of the law is and what you should and shouldn't be seizing. But I do understand how difficult it is, and we are here to help. So below I've put some contact details for Warwickshire Police. If you, for example, live in Warwickshire and you have some direct concerns or you want to feed into it yourself, their contact details are down below, as well as a link to a couple of the news articles which featured this story, which unfortunately perpetuated facts about the law which are wrong, categorically wrong. So don't believe what you read in the newspapers all the time. So thanks for sticking with me and listening to the whole of this video. I hope it's taken in the spirit of helpfulness and openness which it's intended. I work in this business. I also work with the government, former civil servant. I am trying to help on both sides, okay? And I hope that this video calms some blood pressures and calms a few of the people in the antiques trade, collectors, reenactors, fencers, all of the people I know, thousands, tens of thousands of people I know, who've been up in arms about this and really panicking, like thinking there's a law change. There hasn't been a law change. I hope this helps to calm the situation down a bit. And once again, Warwickshire Police, I hope that we can sort this mess out as soon as possible. Cheers, folks.